Happy Monday and welcome back to Makeup and Mental Health Monday. If you're new, welcome for the first time. If you're coming back, thank you for watching for the past few weeks or the previous time or however many times you've been here. Thank you. My name is Johnna and every week I sit down and do my makeup while I talk about a different aspect of mental health. This week we are going to be talking about, but why don't you love me? So, we all have those people that just don't like us. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is why some people just don't like us and what are some ways that we can still, live our lives and play nice in the sandbox because, they won't just go away just because we don't like one another. Or, you could do that if you block them from all your social profiles, but, they're still going to be in, the stratosphere of existence. And, it's one thing to block someone out for your mental health and your own personal safety and that kind of thing, but it's another thing to have to work with that asshole coworker or that neighbor or whatever the case may be, where you're going to have to see them. And there's also the other side of that, or another side, where we, some people who are considered allies, it's a matter of not just shutting that out, because we need to have the hard conversations. So how do we do that? And so those are the things that I'm going to be talking about this week. And all the products I'm going to be using will be listed below in the description box. That is where the conversation continues. So please do make any comments that you have. If you're more comfortable having a conversation one-on-one, then you can slide into my DMs over on Instagram at Soul Searching and Squats, and we can have a conversation about this over there. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so when it comes to thinking about why people don't like us, let's first get clear on why do we even give a shit? And you know how I like to take it back to science and how our brains were built and how we were just made to work. And it is because on a biological level, strength in numbers. So when you think about it, as humans were evolving, it made sense to share resources. If you think about it in terms of any living mammal, it makes sense that they too do the same thing. Think about, a lion pride or a pack of wolves or a herd of sheep. It makes sense that they have this strength in numbers because it helps aid in their survival rate. And if you look into those, there's different ways about how they hunt together and protect and all those kinds of things to make sure that they protect the safety of the herd or the group and their longevity and chances of survival. So on a biological level, that's why. And if you want to take it to another sense, a lot of times it also has something to do with how we were raised. So if you had an experience where, let's say, you would do things for a parent or an authority figure or anyone that would then praise you for doing what it is that they approve of or what it is that they like, then you grew up getting that kind of fulfillment and sense of self-worth based on their approval. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, community and acceptance and belonging is right above your physiological needs of shelter and food, and then your needs of safety. Community comes right after that. And so it would make sense because we need to know that these people have our back. We need to know that we have a support system, our ride or die, and we need that understanding and that sense of being heard and seen before we can go on to develop our own self-esteem and self-actualization in that sense. So there are all these reasons why we care and why it makes a difference when someone doesn't like us. And so it's one of those things where it's not just oh, I want to be liked. It literally is in your DNA. It's like how we were set up. It's how we were wired. And so, people pleasing is one thing, which we've talked about. But this is like another in the sense that, like we need community. Like it's how we were set up. And so it's, again, like a different situation if you are considering like, oh, I just want them to like me because I want to be cool, or like they're cool, or like whatever, versus actually having, like your safe space, your container, like a healthy relationship where you feel like loved and supported, and then all those things so that you can be yourself. And I'll talk about that a bit more in just a second or a few minutes. But yeah, so like that's like kind of why we care. That's why we want to be liked. And in those terms or considerations, then if that's the case, if we all just want to be like loved and seen and like heard for like who we are, then why are there some a-holes out there that just don't like us? And that is because when someone has values that don't align with theirs, you threaten their group, you threaten their tribe, you threaten their, like what they've got going on, like their community. And so within that, you might be like breaking up like the group dynamic if you were to, infiltrate, if you will, if you were to like come into that situation. Like they've got a good thing going on, like they're with their people, they're comfortable being themselves. And if you come along being yourself and that's not who they are, then they're going to usually sometimes feel some type of way about it. And I think that that's something that we can all think of examples about in our own lives, especially considering where we are with like politics and race and things like that in our society. And so it's a matter of knowing and like figuring out like what you want to do about it in those situations. And I'll talk more about that in a second. It's something that, and I'm making sure like I took notes. I want to make sure that I get all this stuff in. So they threaten, so people don't like us because you're threatening like their group and their tribe. And since we all just want to be loved and accepted, why don't we then just like conform? Why don't we then just become like this thing that this other group is, just so that we will be liked? Like, where's the harm in that? And the harm in that, and this is something I preach all the time, is that if you are trying to contort yourself into something that you're not, so that you can fit in this box that wasn't made for you, then you're going to spend your whole life uncomfortable. And it's a situation where I think a lot of times we do that like unknowingly because we don't take the time or we don't have the opportunity to explore these safe spaces where we can be ourselves. And so, you get in these experiences with these people and these groups, and the next thing you know, you're like, shit, I don't like these assholes. But, that's who you are. Like, that's all you know. That's, the identity that you've adopted for yourself. And that's why I take so much time to, like, do what I do and preach to people and talk to them and support them in finding those safe communities and those safe containers or tribes or whatever you want to call them, so that they can have the confidence and self-actualization to step out of it if that's not like what's for them, and really become who they are. Because if we are just changing who we are and like conforming in order to fit into this idea or this label of what we think it is that we should be, then we're not being true to ourselves. And this is something I've said before, and I will say again, and you will hear me talk of it a lot. Then like those people aren't your friends anyway, because you're not being who you are. You're being who you think that they want you to be. And so like WTF. So yeah, it matters. It matters that you have the safe spaces. It matters that you are making sure that you take the time to find your tribe, to find your community, your pack, your pride, whatever the hell you want to call it. You find your people. It is important that you take the time to do that and that you have the space to do that, so that you can be yourself. And so, with that being said, like, that's all great. We love that, but that's not why we're here. The reason we are here today is because we are going to talk about how the F do we get along with these people that just don't like us, the ones that, you know, see us as a threat, the ones that our values don't align. And it's, you know, one thing for us to be like, oh, I'm just gonna shut them out, you know, like, nah, I don't want to be a part of that. Because I think in today, in our political climate, in our, you know, human rights climate, in our social justice climate, there are people who can act as allies and use their voices, and they should. And I'm one of them. And so if that is you, if you are someone who, because I recognize that we are all in different spaces and different places in our lives, but if that is you, if you are someone who can have these conversations, then we're going to talk about some ways to do that. And I'm very present to the fact that, you know, it doesn't have to be you getting on YouTube and doing your makeup. It doesn't have to be you going to a political rally. It doesn't have to be you petitioning in the streets. It can very well be you talking to your family in the privacy of your own home, but it is important. And so, with that being said, when we are considering, you know, that we want to have that conversation, then how do we do that? And I'm also going to talk about, like, after this, like, okay, what if, like, it's not in my well-being, it's not in my best interest for me to be having these conversations, like, what does that look like too? So, I wrote down some steps. The first thing is accept that it is, you know, not it is what it is, like, oh, like, F it, like, nothing I can do about it, but accept that, like, hey, yeah, like, this is the reality, like, this is what it looks like, this is what is true, like, right now, like, and, you know, while, yeah, there are things that you can do to change that, what's true right now in this moment is true based on previous experiences and, you know, your previous experiences and, you know, a whole, like, chain of events that have just led up to, like, what's happening. And I'm talking about in your personal life, I'm talking about in, like, society, I'm talking about all of it, all of that. Like, it is what it is, and it's a matter of, first of all, like, looking at the reality. So this is kind of, like, taking us back to, like, week one. We spoke about, like, baseline, possibility, like, that kind of stuff. Well, baseline is what part we're on right now. But considering, yeah, like, wow, like, this is true. Like, this is what it is. And from there, acknowledging that we have a choice. And so this is what I was saying when I kind of, like, prefaced this whole, the little last part that I've just been talking about. We have a choice. And so we have a choice of either shutting it down, not engaging, not saying anything, and just removing ourselves from the situation. Or we have a choice to engage and do something about it. And so if you are in a space where it's in your best interest to, you know, stay safe for you and your family and your livelihood, then, you know, there are ways to disengage, and that can look like blocking people on social media. That can look like, you know, not blocking people, but just kind of being like a voyeur in the sense of, like, you're keeping aware of, like, what's going on, but you're not, you know, participating or partaking in any kind of way. That can look like you know, not saying anything, whatever, you know, you need to do. And at the same time, if you can do things, then, I mean, it's time. So, if you can do things and you decide that, okay, yeah, like, that's my choice, I want to engage, then it's a matter of considering that, like, what you want that choice to be, and the ways that you can go about it. So acknowledging, yeah, like, you have the choice, and then, like, what are your choices? So if your choice is to engage, then what does that look like to you? And getting clear on, are you going to say something next time your friend, like, makes a joke that's not funny, or your coworker, or what does your engagement look like? And also acknowledging the fact that you're not going to be able to, you're not going to have some profound impact like day one or the first time you do it. And just being present to that, like, these people who have these mindsets, it's not something where you will change them, like, where they'll have this, like, big epiphany one day. I mean, maybe something will happen and they'll be like, oh shit, I was wrong all along. But that's probably going to come after time, after taking the time to, like, chisel away and, like, have repeated conversations and answer questions and really help them understand, like, what's going on and, like, what the views are and, like, why they're insensitive, and just being mindful of that and being patient. Because if you are expecting to, like, change the world, like, overnight, I hate to break it to you, but we didn't get where we are overnight. We got where we are over years of shit. So the chances of us changing overnight, I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but slim. Real slim. So just making sure that you are cognizant of that. Whenever it comes to the next step, acting. Because now that you have acknowledged, you've accepted, like, yeah, it is what it is, you have acknowledged that, yeah, you have a choice and you considered what choice you want to make, it's a matter of considering what those action steps are. And I kind of touched on this a second ago whenever I was like, yeah, like, do you say something to your coworker? Like, what do your action steps look like? And how are you going to hold yourself accountable? Like, how are you going to have check-ins with this? Like, how are you going to make sure that you are still, like, doing this as time moves on and it's not as present on your mind? Like, what are you doing to, like, keep this on the forefront of your awareness? And yeah, like, okay, let's say you are going to say something the next time someone makes a joke. All right, what are you going to say? Like, what are you going to respond? Like, go ahead and anticipate these things proactively so that you have an idea of your reactions to them so that you can be prepared if and when the time comes. And I mean, let's be honest, time's probably going to come. So, yeah, the more prepared you are, the better. And I used this example in coaching recently, and it was, go ahead and consider, like, what the action, like, what the action items are and what the outcome may be, because whenever you kind of have an idea of what you're looking at, you're going to be better prepared. And if you think of it in terms of, like, climbing a mountain, if I'm just like, I want to get to the top, but I just go for it and I don't take any time to think about, like, oh, what's the weather going to be like? What's the terrain going to look like? Then, you know, I don't know what the fuck's in my backpack. I don't know what to put in there. Maybe I've got a bottle of water and, you know, like, some Slim Jims. Do people still eat those? Anyway, you know, maybe that's all I brought with me, when actually, like, it's going to rain, it's going to be cold, it's not going to be done in a day, like, I need to pack a tent, you know, just being aware in that sense so that you can make sure that you are the most prepared that you could possibly be for the situation. And from there, taking time to consider, like, what tools you can use to keep your own sanity and your own health and your own accountability, like I said earlier, and, you know, check on, like, what's working and what isn't. Like, what is it that, you know, you can do? And whenever you are going into these conversations, like, what tools can support you? Like, do you need to watch some videos? Do you need to role play with a friend, which is something I've spoken about before? Do you need to, you know, look up NonViolent aka compassionate communication, which I highly suggest. And that's just like a methodology of having like these difficult conversations, or like a framework, if you will. And it basically, Cliff Notes version, is saying that it's important to use language, self-reflect first, like make sure that you're not like coming at this like some type of way, because if you're going to be having difficult conversations, you want to come across as open for the other person and not guarded and defensive, because that's going to make the other person guarded and defensive. Shocker, right? Who would have thunk it? As some people say, who would have thought it? I don't know what that was. So yeah, who would have thought that? And using language that disarms instead of puts people on defense. So not only like your tone and your presence, but also the words that you are using to get this across. And so, with that being said, let me wrap this up, put on lips, and I'll come right back and I will talk about the language and we'll wrap it up for the day. Cool. I'm very present to the fact that it's not Halloween, but who doesn't love a good black lip? So, anywho, I am here to talk about some of the languaging that you can use whenever you are trying on nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. I am going to reference it as compassionate communication simply because whenever we say nonviolent, our minds automatically go to like what that violent aspect is or can be or was for us. And so that can be triggering and like a negative connotation. So I don't think any of us like thinks of violence in a good situation. Like, yeah, violence, you know, like no, no. So with that being said, just removing that from like possibility and calling it compassionate communication. But if you want to learn more, you can Google either term and you will find lots of results. So with that being said, 3 things. First of all, use I statements. So I observed this. This is my experience. Like things where you are taking ownership for the words that you are saying. You never want to tell someone what they did or how they feel, ever. So don't come at someone with, well, you did this, and like, whenever you said that, even if that is true, use I observed, which takes us to the next one, which is state, you know, how, that you are coming from a place of your observations and your perspectives. So not just like, oh, well, you did this, or you did that, because that automatically puts people on defense. They're going to start like, they're going to immediately come at you with like combative, like I have to defend myself, versus, you know, your observations, that's like your interpretation. And so while, yeah, they might come at that with a defensive attitude anyway, at least you are prefacing the situation with, hey, like this is my experience, this is my perspective, this is my observation, whatever. Like you're taking ownership for the words that are coming out of your mouth. Another thing is you kind of want to be vague, because you don't want to give them too many details, because what happens a lot of times when you give people like specifics on, well, you said, you know, this quote or whatever, they pick out what is the most offensive to them and like they hang on it. So you kind of want to be vague in the sense that, hey, the other day I observed a joke that you had said, I overheard it, and, you know, I feel that it was inappropriate because. Sounds a lot better than, yeah, last Tuesday, whenever you said that joke, it was really fucked up because that, like, that's something a real dick would say. And so, like, you can kind of tell the difference in between, like, the languaging. I stuttered on, like, the last example, but, I mean, you can kind of feel it. And, like, think of your own examples and think of, you know, some different ways to, like, phrase them and just kind of see how you would feel if someone came at you with those different scenarios and different statements. Like, same scenario, different statement, because it's a matter of, yeah, you want the person to, like, hear you out versus, like, go to war with you kind of thing and, like, start, like, battling it out. And so in that sense, just taking time to be really calm and conscious of the things that you're saying. And a lot of times too, this is like something that I like to do personally, just ask them like, hey, can I talk to you about something? Because when someone says yes to you, you're already teaching them to agree with what you say and to be more agreeable. So they're agreeing to the situation, which kind of already puts them like more at ease, versus if you're just like, yeah, I want to talk to you about something. Like that already, I'm like, whoa. Like, what do you want to talk about? Like, what did I do? Something happened? Like, what is this? So just getting their permission. Like, hey, do you mind if we talk about this? Or can we talk about this? Whatever verbiage is true to you. But those are my tips on that. And that's all I have for you this week. I just wanted to, bring this to your awareness and your YouTube feeds or wherever you're watching this, because I think it's important that we recognize, why we get so caught up on whether or not someone likes us, and, why some people just won't like us, and, what some ways are that we can protect ourselves, whether that need to be from like a safety perspective, a mental health perspective, or whether or not we want to, have a conversation with these people and engage with them in an attempt to, help them understand like the other point of view, if that is something that is an option to you as well. And I want to make sure that I gave you some tools to do that. So that is all I have for you. Thank you for watching. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, put them in the comments or slide into my DMs over on Instagram. And next week we are going to be talking about creating balance. So why balance and routines are like important, and what are some ways to create those in our lives. And yeah, that's all I have for you. So thank you. Have a wonderful day, and I will hopefully see you next week. Bye.